I'm just going to start out kind of understanding where the town is regarding the city or town manager position, and particularly the process in selecting the interim, and also the process for the permanent replacement. And if you could give me a sense of what the HR department's role would be if that was in place for this.
So within the charter, it allows for an interim city manager to fill the role when the full-time manager is not available or is not renewed or resigns or is in some way not available. And so the expectation is that we're going to continue on a modified contract with the current city manager, Patrick Komisky, for about a month and go from that point into an interim period with an interim manager who's also going to be hopefully part of the process of selecting and performing the search for a new permanent manager for the city. We do have an individual that we're looking at right now. Discussions are ongoing. I don't really want to go into too much detail in that regard before everything's in place. You know, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. But what I will say is that the individual that we're in conversation with right now to serve as an interim and also to serve as an aide with regard to finding a permanent replacement is someone that's got decades of experience as a city manager in the state of Maryland, was very successful in what he did in another municipality for a period of almost 30 years, and is someone that we hope can come in, really stabilize the position and ensure everything's in place before we do bring in a full-time manager, to ensure that the full-time manager that we do bring in is coming into a situation that is perfectly ready for them to take the reins and move forward.
Let me understand a little bit more about how the process works. I mean, particularly if you are successful in plans to create a HR department for the town. I guess there's always kind of anxieties about HR departments and, you know, what kind of control they have in terms of their responsibilities for the recruitment and hiring of these positions. Could you give us a lowdown on that?
So on these upper level positions, department head, city manager, city attorney, the HR department's not really going to, first off, it won't be in place at that point, or if it is, it won't really enter into that discussion insofar as making a determination. The role of an HR department, should we have one in place by the time we move from interim to selection of a full-time manager, is really going to be a review of documents. It's going to be ensuring that the documentation that's provided is accurate. It's going to be like that. The role itself with regard to a search and the selection of a manager really does fall to, because of the language in the charter, a search committee or search group that's made up of individuals selected by the council, and then also the mayor on that committee. And then that's submitted to the council for their approval with review of the credentials and the background. So in this case, an HR department's role really is more about ensuring that the documentation that's provided is accurate and is going to be fully complete, and that they're in compliance with any other requirements that may exist. But with regard to an actual hiring, there's no role there. Now, of course, because the department doesn't exist, but even moving forward with the department head level or manager level appointment, that's not really going to enter into the situation.
Will that be the same once there is presumably an HR department in place for the lower level employees, or will they actually be doing the hiring and firing through that personnel department?
So it appears with the language that exists right now that's being bandied about, and look, there's nothing finalized, that they would be part of the selection process insofar as they would be in consultation with the manager and the department head. But again, it's going to ultimately come back to, I think, the manager having the ultimate authority. But you know, we want to ensure too that the people that are working directly and that are in direct supervision, these department leaders, department heads, do have the ability to put people in the place that they think are most appropriate for the positions, so long as the qualifications and the backgrounds are met and they do meet the needs within whatever the job description is. You know, we don't want, I think, the city manager wasting his time, and I don't say that lightly, but wasting his time reviewing all the documentation from someone that applies to be a general maintenance worker or on a street crew. You know, the manager's time is best used in performing the daily operational function and not reviewing those kinds of things. But at the same time, they will have sign off no matter what as part of the process with the HR department, with anyone that's a department level director as well, because, you know, ultimately they're going to be the direct report for these folks.
Yeah. Mike, do you have
Yeah, well, let me just talk about, ask you about a couple of things that are going on in town right now.
Mhm.
So the building where the fire was with the tragic consequences has now been demolished. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was demolished, I believe, on Tuesday and Wednesday of the last week of July, uh, and it's the cleanup's ongoing now as well with that. Um, the demolition was delayed, as we've talked about, because of the investigation, and then also private investigation into the cause and result of the fire as well. All that's been concluded. The demolitions occurred. I'm not sure what the next step is for the property owner because it ultimately is their call what they're going to do with the property, if they're going to build there, if they're going to hold the property in its current condition or in a cleaned up condition, of course. But the demolition has been performed, and I think that's uh, to some relief to some of the surrounding property owners and business owners because it was a hazard standing in that condition, but the investigations did have to be completed before we could do anything further.
Unfortunately, I have to bring up COVID. We all have seen this new explosion because of the Delta variant. And, I know that at least from the SPY's perspective, the numbers are still modest for the Eastern Shore. But it's good to get your take on this.
So we're still observing what's going on with that, with the rise in the COVID numbers. We've been looking at what is being done by the Dorchester County Health Department. I think at last tally, there are around a dozen cases in the county, which is not a large number, but it's concerning because we got down to one active case within the county at one point. So we are seeing that it's coming back, and we don't want to get to a point where it's at 30 cases, 50 cases, 70 cases, and 100 cases, or up to 200 cases, as we saw very early this year. So we're continuing to monitor that. We're hoping that people can continue seeking out vaccinations. Again, encouraging people without ordering people to take precautions with regard to mask wearing in public and situations like that. Ultimately, we're going to continue moving forward with recommendations that we see from the state and the federal government, and we're going to ensure that we don't have it come back to the level that we had here, because ultimately that was a real killer for businesses in this community, and we can't allow it to get back to that point. So as we monitor, we don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive, but at the same time, with the number where it is, we don't want to overreact either and prevent or harm businesses from doing what they need to do at this time.
Can you talk a bit about the excitement of some big openings that are scheduled for next month? I guess the Packing House and the new Intergenerational Center, just being a couple of them, as well as a horde of prospective Ironmen coming to town and descending.
There's a lot going on over the course of the next month and a half, 2 months. As was mentioned, we have the Packing House is coming online. We're working really hard as well to get things moving forward with Cannery Park, which is going to be located behind the Packing House. I had a discussion today with the city planning director, Pat Escher, regarding that. We are still a bit short on the funding for full phase one. We think we can reach that goal, and we think we can have the completion of phase one coincide or happen just behind the completion and the opening of the Packing House. We do also have some excitement because of the Rails to Trails. That's an ongoing project, and it's really visible, right? You go down Cedar Street or Washington Street, and what was a jungle for years is opened up, and you can really visualize and have an expectation for what that's going to be moving forward. In addition to that, as was mentioned, the Intergenerational Center at DCT. Looking forward to that. I actually met last week with Santo Grande and some of the staff there on a different topic, but just wanted to, while I was with him, thank him for the things that they do trying to move the community forward. And as well, even going beyond that, we've got about 2.5 months from now the opening of the new Shore Medical Center at Dorchester, which is going to be a Dorchester Marketplace, and a number of other things. So lots of progress, lots of good things going on, and look, a lot of home building going on too. It's pretty exciting riding through Longboat and seeing lots that were for sale for a decade with houses on them. It's equally exciting to ride through the little portion of the West Side Bypass that can be entered and seeing projects that were platted and expected to be built 15 years ago now moving forward. But we've got to ensure that we've got amenities, and we've got to ensure that we've got jobs for these individuals. So one of the real focuses right now is working with our economic development, working with county economic development to move things forward in that regard. And something that's kind of gotten out there in the community that I think is firm enough to talk about at this point is the situation now at the shopping center where the Save-A-Lot previously was. We expect that we're going to have an Aldi grocery store opening there probably October, November. We're far enough along to now count that as a project that's in the wings about to occur. So
back on the rails and trails for a second, is that going to go out to the airport eventually?
So that is still somewhat up in the air. We're hoping to acquire the existing rail bed from Washington Street to the airport as the city. It was previously offered to the county, I believe all the way to Hurlock or perhaps all the way to the Caroline County line. At one time, the county was interested in taking the responsibility and building a regional trail network off of that. It appears that right now the county has perhaps reduced their interest in that, though not totally walked away from it. But we have been in conversation with the Maryland Department of Transportation about acquiring the line to the airport, working on that as an extension of that trail network, finding alternative ways to have it connect to the Walmart shopping center into that area, and build an alternative method of ingress and egress in and out of the city for people that are visiting or for residents as well. One of the difficulties we do have is that it does cross out of the city's corporate limits on a couple of locations. So we're going to have to work on what that looks like, whether there be an MOU with the county that we maintain it, or that we annex simply the width of the railhead itself, the rail bed itself, and not not any of the surrounding properties who may not have a desire to enter the city at this time.
Go ahead.
You mentioned economic development as being critical to all this, and this so-called river of cash that had come down from federal sources and flowed into the state and all. Are you seeing the benefits of that to get some of these big projects completed that needed extra dollars?
I think for some of these private projects, they've found their funding sources and they're working through it, some of which is going to be some of that public money. For example, Packing House has a great relationship with the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm working on some other angles there for some of the public access components of that project. But by and large, we're still in the process of getting to the point where the money flows from the federal government to the state and then passes through either to the county or to the city. So there's still a process there that's ongoing. I do know that there are some other projects that are in the pipeline right now that haven't been finalized. And so I yet again, things that I want to talk about that we can't quite yet, probably by next month when we check in again, we'll be able to talk about them once they're more finalized. But there is a flow of funding that's going to be coming that's going to be fairly transformative for some of our, especially our marginalized residential areas within the city. Pine Street Historic District, South Pine, there is an opportunity there with some federal money that's going to be flowing through the state to make a huge impact in those areas that have seen lack of investment or disinvestment over time.
I guess I still continue to see a lot of concern and anxiety about crime. And I guess the issue, or maybe the opportunity, is there any good news to share on that front? I mean,
we had a Police Citizens Advisory Board meeting yesterday, July 28th. And in that meeting, we discussed what we were seeing with crime over the course of the last 12 months, from July 5 of 2020 through July 27 of this year. So just over a year. And there is a lot of progress. There's still very visible violent crime that's ongoing, but our number of reported thefts is down significantly. Our number of motor vehicle thefts is, it's something like 1/6 or 1/7 of where it was a year ago. So we do see in certain areas really an improvement. Where we don't see an improvement is in that gunplay, in the violent crime that's associated either mostly with firearms, but to some extent also bladed weapons. We've had a number of stabbings as well, but the shootings are up a significant amount, as most people know, and that's problematic. It's hugely problematic. But the one win that we do have in that regard, in the calendar year prior, or I'm sorry, in the same period prior to this July to July from 20 to 21, from July 19 to July 20, we'd only seen something like 11 firearms taken off the street. And in the same period over the course of the last year, police have recovered 35 illegally carried firearms on the street. And they've made a number of arrests in these violent crimes as well, and also have 2 open warrants right now. And we believe we're getting close to the individuals that those warrants are seeking. So, while there is visible violent crime ongoing, there is also effort that's helping with that. And one of the big things that we see there is what appears to be somewhat of a turf war between some factions that are centered in the South Pine neighborhood and also in the Greenwood neighborhood. And if you look at a map of where these things are occurring, they're concentrated in South Pine between, Boundary, Moores Avenue, Robin Street area, and the ancillary streets from there, and then the Greenwood Avenue area. So we know where it is. The staffing issue has been a real difficulty for the city with the police department, and it has limited our ability to fully investigate things because we've simply not had the manpower. But there is light at the end of the tunnel there. We have 5 officers in the academy right now. Over the course of the last week, I've sworn in 2 new officers as well. We have another officer who should be coming on board. We have a number of other certified officers we're in discussions with. So going from terribly understaffed back to fully staffed should be an attainable reality over the course of the next 6 months to a year. And that's really going to be huge. I think it'll be the first time that CPD has been fully staffed in about a decade.
One of the intractable things seems to be the lack of reporting, and witnesses just will not come forward, even though it's obvious there was a crowd there when somebody was stabbed or shot. Are there alternative strategies being talked about, like lots of cameras being installed, so at least there might be some video trace of what happened?
We're talking right now about improvements to the cameras where they currently exist, but also about extension of the camera network into some of these other areas where we see these as hotspots. One of the issues that we do have is the surrounding infrastructure that's necessary to make that happen. You have to run not just the cameras themselves, but also the communication lines, and that's something that's a bit of a difficulty. One thing that I've thrown about a little bit is the idea of one of these shot spotter systems that we see in a lot of other cities. There's a possibility we may be able to get that funded by a grant, but that serves to concentrate the area of response when there is a shooting. And what we do find is there are a lot of shootings where no one's hit, there's no property damage, and people don't call 911. They're used to hearing gunshots. So I was talking to Chief Lewis yesterday. He thinks that there are between 150 and 200 shots fired incidents in the city on an annual basis where there is not a report made. And that's really problematic, right? But if we have a system in place that can detect these things and dispatch officers to them, that is a real deterrent, because these folks that may be doing it as a matter of threat or doing, firing shots and simply have a bad aim. Let's be honest. There are a lot of times where people are attempting to injure someone else and they miss. And so in those cases where it may not be reported, we'd like to have a system in place that allows for a response anyway. And that's something I've got to meet with some local funding groups on. We're working on getting something set up for the week following next on that, and also in-car cameras and tag readers for CPD. What we do find too is oftentimes if you have a tag reader that can trace back to the owner of a vehicle, you may have someone with an open warrant for one of these crimes that's driving by, and with the ability to have it determined that they have an open warrant, that helps.
Mayor, can you squash the rumor that you're not entering into Ironman as a participant?
Well, I'm not entering into Ironman as a participant. However, I do have a close friend who tells me he had a vision of me in Eagleman next year. It's going to be tough. I like mashed potatoes too much. I like to go out and get steak dinners too much, and darn it, I just like chocolate too much. So it's going to be really tough. But I am hopeful that maybe I'll do something like that, or at least one leg of it, something of that nature. One thing that I can announce is it appears that I'll be representing the city of Cambridge in September on a skydiving jump with the Army Golden Knights, which is the world-class, world-famous champion skydiving team of the United States Army. I had the Salisbury recruiting station reach out, and they said they were looking for local Delmarva figures to take part. And for some reason, I said, "Oh yeah." And now I can.
That sounds like fun.
Well, I don't know about that, Mike. It doesn't.
We'll have to cover that.
It does sound like an experience.
We promise not to say break a leg on that one. Okay.
Thank you all. See you next month.
Thanks, guys.